So when you talk about inverses, okay, the one thing that we should probably start with overall is that only one-to-one functions have inverses. And in order for a function to be one-to-one, each output in a function can only be produced by one input, okay? And that's the idea of one-to-one, all right? One x value produces one y value, right? We talked about how you can't plug in X and get Y, and then plug in X and also get, you know, negative Y. That's bad, right? You can't have one input value produce two output values. This means something can't be a function, okay? But we did say that it is all right in terms of functions, right? It is okay for a function to say have if you plug in x and you get y, and then you also plug in a and you get y again. We said that's okay. Like here, just let's use this example. If for function f, we square the input, right? What do we get if we plug in a 2? If we plug in a 2 and we square it, we get a 4, right? 4 is the output. 2 is the input, 4 is the output. If we plug in a negative 2, what happens? We get negative 2 squared, which is positive 4, right? Now we know that this x squared, right? We know it's a function, right? Because it passes the vertical line test. So take a look, right? Here's our parabola for x squared. So when we plug in a 2 and we get, let's say this point right here is 2, 4. Let's say this point here is negative 2, 4, right? That's okay. This function passes the vertical line test, okay? So we're good to go with that. We had two different inputs that gave us the same output. No problem there. When we talk about a function being one-to-one, that means we're not allowed to produce the same output from different inputs. So we're not allowed to have the number 4 show up from two different numbers, okay? It's a lot easier to think of it, say, you can't have any repeated y values. And the one thing that we can do to make this easy on ourselves when we're looking at the graph is the horizontal line test, okay? This, again, let's look at this parabola. This parabola passes the vertical line test, okay? So this is a function, all right? Function, yay. But when you talk about, is this function one-to-one, okay, does it pass the horizontal line test? The horizontal line test does the same thing as the vertical line test. We look to see if we're going to hit this graph twice. And if we hit this graph twice, like we do here, and in multiple other places, okay, because we hit this graph twice, we've repeated this output value of 2. We have to say, no, this is not one-to-one, and therefore it has no inverse, okay? So there's no inverse function for x squared using the domain and range that we already have. Now there's more that we can add to that, but the bottom line here is the horizontal line test. Okay, you'll want to write this part down. The horizontal line test tests to see if a function is one-to-one. If a function is one-to-one, then it has an inverse, right? If it doesn't pass the horizontal line test, it is not one-to-one, and it does not have an inverse over its domain and range.